Talking about TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, the media, both here in Australia and in the US, not only have a severe case, but it appears incurable. They will straight out lie, gaslight and push Democrat propaganda they know to be untrue. This week, after the quiet coup that saw 14 million votes invalidated, the democratic process disregarded, and Kamala Harris installed as the new presidential candidate, the Democrats were keen to distance the Veep from her role as the border czar, given that is one of the biggest failures of the current administration and a major issue in the upcoming election. And to their eternal shame, the bulk of the media dutifully repeated a Democrat talking point. Well, not Fox News' Peter Doocy, he still has a little thing called integrity.
Democrats on Capitol Hill are being handed this card with talking points about the vice president and the border. Do you know who's handing this out?
I have no idea. You probably should ask her campaign.
So the first one says Vice President Harris was never appointed border czar. There's never been such a position. It doesn't exist. Why are Democrats so sensitive?
Corinne Jean-Pierre there said she has no idea who handed out that little card attempting to rewrite history. She suggested asking Harris's campaign. Corinne, being deliberately clueless, is on brand. As for the majority of the media, from CNN to ABC to MSNBC to CBS, they were all ready to, in unison, repeat that lie. Have a look at the following minute of how they reported Kamala's appointment as the border czar at the time and what they claimed this week.
Quote unquote border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar.
Orwellian. And that's just a small sample of the rewriting of history we've seen this week. And the so-called fact checkers, aka leftist activists masquerading as impartial truth seekers, well, they got into the act too. PolitiFact and USA Today ran fact checks claiming that Kamala was never the border czar. It was all some sort of right-wing conspiracy. I guess this dude must have been on the plot. Here's President Joe Biden announcing that his Vice President Harris would be leading efforts to stem the flood of illegal immigration at the southern border.
I've asked her, the VP today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle and the countries that help. We're going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks stemming the migration to our southern border.
And even the media was at one point putting some pressure on Kamala Harris to visit the border to do something about the record numbers of immigrants crossing that southern border illegally. More than 2 million a year under the Biden administration.
We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
She doesn't understand the point. And here is Kamala being asked about finally visiting the border as the person in charge of the response.
I've been to the border many times.
As the person in charge of the response.
So the important aspect of this visit is leading this visit after the work that we did in Guatemala and Mexico. Because as I've long said, I said back in March I was going to come to the border, so this is not a new plan. But the reality of it is that we have to deal with causes and we have to deal with the effects.
But she didn't deal with the causes or the effects. Under her watch, the Biden administration broke records for the numbers crossing illegally. But even during the height of the ongoing crisis, Kamala was claiming the border was secure and whatever problems existed, well, they were Trump's fault.
The first request we made, pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure. But we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border.
They don't have a secure border, and now the media claims she was never the border czar, a title she has for some time tried to disown, obviously, because of her failure to do anything constructive to solve that substantial issue. And it's not just the border. The media this week also engaged in Orwellian lies to claim she never raised bail money for BLM rioters. Not only did she do that, the tweet she posted encouraging donations is still up. And the link to that fund is still active. You can still donate. It features Kamala's image and invites donations to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which, by the way, freed thugs taking part in those BLM riots, some of whom went on to commit even more heinous crimes, including murder. Look, we all want to imagine what can be, unburdened by what has been, but that does not mean you can simply wipe out facts, figures and inconvenient truths and rewrite history. Well, not unless you're a Democrat presidential candidate.